Now for the Reverend Chris Nielsen, or the Reverend Chris as I call her. She comes to us from the Ohio Meadville District, where she served a congregation, the Southwest UU Church in North Royalton, Ohio for about 10 years. She also was the head of the ministry chapter in Ohio Meadville and has done a lot of work in the stewardship area. In fact, stewardship is going to be part of her responsibilities as in her job here. And she's done many other things in that district and in her life, some of which I think we'll hear about today. We had an all-star search team that selected Chris, and I just want to acknowledge that search team. 2 members from the board, Jeff Donahue and Nancy Reed, the Reverend Douglas Taylor from the Binghamton Church, Melissa McKinnon, the DRE from Schenectady, Ted Feder, who's the president of the Metro New York District, and then Joan Van Beesler, who is our Surge Central East Regional Group lead, as well as the district executive of the Ohio Meadville District. Wonderful team, selected Chris, and just a couple of things that they said as to why they selected Chris. They were very impressed by her mediation and organizational skills, her stewardship success, and her ability to help people move forward even in difficult circumstances. Now, we don't have those in St. Lawrence, so I'm not sure what she's doing. I guess they came in handy in Ohio Meadville. So. Chris has said to me and to others that this is the job, this is the ministry she's been waiting for her whole life. And so we're thrilled to have her here in St. Lawrence, and she'll tell us a little bit about herself over the next 45 minutes. Chris?
Thank you. What a great pleasure to be here and to be finally living in New York after months of time in my car. I don't think that's going to end, but it's much better to be here. I'm living in Rochester, New York, and I have a phone number that's permanent now instead of the 5 that I've had over the last 4 months. So it's good to be here and to be a little bit more settled. I'm still surrounded by boxes, but it's as settled as I'm going to get for right now. So today I want to talk about making leadership personal, because I believe that we do whatever actions that we take from a very strong spiritual core, and tapping into that is what ignites our spirit. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit of where that comes from for me, and I invite you to start to think about that yourself. What is it that constitutes your own spiritual core? Now, I grew up in a time and a place where church was still the center of the community. Not going to church on Sunday, that wasn't an option. Sunday came around, you went to Sunday school. Now, my parents didn't go to church. They dropped us off, and we went to church. But church was the center of community. It was in church where we learned that the elderly had some needs, or that we had people in the nursing home that we wanted to visit. Everybody had a role. I was raised in a very small community, rural Minnesota, and I guess it's not the work from here. That was. And I went to a church that was a fundamentalist. Flip to the back. All right. Excuse me for a minute. Get the quick version of the show. Okay, there we go. That's my home church. It's a fundamentalist Norwegian Lutheran church in French Lake, Minnesota. And there was a Norwegian church and a Finnish church and a Swedish church. So that was their version of diversity. When the church celebrated its 100th year anniversary, they decided that we could break down those boundaries and worship together. My grandparents started that church. This is the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And I think it's good to remind ourselves that we all come from very humble beginnings. We all start as infants with not much skill or ability to function on our own, but we all grow up and have acquired a lot of things that we can do. And of course, if you see the Mississippi and as it winds its way down to the Delta, it is huge and accomplishes great things and has great power. And we should embrace our humble beginnings and not be ashamed to move forward with them. I'm very rooted in family. I have 60 first cousins. My father came from a family of 17 children, and my mom 5. And so we had major family reunions all the time. And this is my partner, Sharon, and she's in New Mexico there, and she had just accomplished a big hike at that point. So just very rooted in family. If something happens to my family, I am very emotionally with them. I have a very deep spirituality that is started in that Norwegian church, but I think of Christianity as my native spiritual language, not my philosophy now, but my native spiritual language, how I learned to talk about church, how I learned to talk about religion and God. I'm very grounded in the music and the arts. My first degree was in theater, and this is a picture of me here with my Tony Tennille hair look. You'll get to see me through the ages. And then on the left side is me in my church. We put a forum on for civil liberties, and my friend Don and I were jamming to Bob Dylan. Bob was always an inspiration to me because he had such a bad voice. I thought that if he could sing and make it famous, I didn't have to be afraid, right? And I'm very rooted in social justice. I did my first social justice project when I was 9 years old. And I just have always had a passion for looking at the environment around me and responding to what's needed there. This is my first gay pride parade. So to me, the perfect day is to go to bed with a dream and to wake up with a purpose. Right? If you have some meaning in your life, it's worth living another day. My favorite group is the Indigo Girls. Anyone know them? All right, so I didn't know about them until seminary. And my friend taught me to sing some of their songs and use those in worship. But they have this great song called Perfect World. And you're listening to it, and it keeps repeating perfect world, and you're kind of lulled into this, thinking, oh, it's a perfect world. But then you get the subtext of the song, and they're singing, when we look the other way. It's a perfect world when we look the other way. We don't notice the war and the famine and all the problems. And that really struck me before seminary and during seminary that we have to look at our world and deal with reality. And so I invite you, when you're looking at your own spiritual nature, what it is that you care about that motivates you to move on. And I thought about my Norwegian community, and it looks idyllic like that. Lots of green hills, lots of space, there's no crowding, but there was a lot of problems. There was an epidemic of domestic abuse. I mapped out the households once where I knew of domestic abuse happening, and it was like 90% of the households. I think almost all of the teens, the girls anyway, got pregnant before they were married because they didn't teach birth control in the schools, or when they did, it wasn't accurate information at all. We need to give our youth accurate information. And there was poverty and loss of jobs and rampant alcohol and drug abuse. And there came the time when Big Blue didn't protect your job anymore, and if you were loyal, you could just retire with the company and get a pension. And at least my generation grew up with knowing that there was not going to be pensions waiting for us. So how do we thrive in this environment where corporations have shifted their loyalties, where the security net of society has gone away. We have very little left in terms of food stamps or emergency funds for people who can't make it on their own. How do we respond to this world and keep our faith intact and not get depressed and just stop acting? So this is a picture from a surge workshop I was at last weekend, and Joseph Priestley, and the sign says, "Be the change you want to see in the world," by, of course, Dalai Lama. So I went to Star King School, and that's where I really learned to nail down how I function best in the world, how I can best respond to different things. And so one of the things I learned about myself is I like to take risks. That's my biker chick look, with the Farrah Fawcett hair, in the 80s, early 80s. And I also like to experiment. And yes, I did actually jump out of a few planes. I'll do anything once, even experiment with this new job I'm holding. So I'm ready for anything, I think. Because I don't work alone, I work as a team, and I love to work as a team. And I think that's it certainly motivated me when I was working as a nurse. After my theater degree, went on to study nursing and worked as a cancer nurse for 15 years. And there you can't survive without working as a team. There's just too much going on, you have to work together. By the way, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So, the creative juices have always been part of my blood. My mother was a singer, and she was an artist, and she really stimulated that in me. When she used to bring me to the nursing homes, she worked at the nursing homes, and we'd go there after church, and we'd sing for the older people, and she always wanted me to sing a solo. And I'm like 9 years old or 10, and she says, "Well, just go and sing for them." And I'd say, "Well, Mom, I'm too scared, I can't do that." And she said, "Oh, just get up there, they just want to see you sing." And I said, "Well, I can't, I'm not good enough." And then she gets frustrated and annoyed with me, and she says, "Oh, for God's sake, half of them are deaf anyway, just do it." So I sang. I sang then and I sang now. And we used a lot of different show tunes in our work at the church. This is our cast from our superheroes last year's canvas. Okay. And I like to recruit help. I like working with kids, and I like working with adults too, but here I'm doing a water communion, and I got them engaged in doing a tasting of water that they created. This is a bowl full of mud and bugs and leaves and pollution, that they all went out and collected all these things and stuffed them in the bowl. And then we pumped them through a filter, and they all got to do it themselves. And then I held up the clean water, which is actually sterile water, and I said, "Who wants to try it?" And they all raised their hands, and all the adults are going, no. The kids were immediately, so I like working with kids. As long as you can channel their energy. So at school, I learned how to teach and how to coach people along. I love teaching. I know I'm going to miss that. And here I write that I'm willing to look foolish, but actually that's Sharon. I'm willing to make other people look foolish. During my very first canvas at the church, we used the theme "Ease on down the road," because the church was nervous about talking about money. They're nervous about having a first steadily called minister, and so we're just going to ease on down with the roads, which is a song from Wiz. And so I dressed up my partner as the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion, and she did a fabulous lion. And then I was Dorothy, and my dog was going to be Toto, but he got sprayed by a skunk. So the night before, we were at the canvas and at the sort of a dinner kickoff kind of thing, and Sharon and I were sitting on the bench out in the lobby, and people were coming by us and like, what's that smell? It's like, oh, got sprayed by a skunk. We're up, washing the dog till 2 o'clock in the morning. So, I have to look foolish sometimes. Oh, man. I think my fingers are too big. All right, let's try this. Failure. I think failure is important. A lot of us get nervous and we get bound in our perfectionism, but it's important to recognize when something doesn't work. This is a fundraiser my church did, and they did it before I was there. I could have told this was not going to work, but they decided to make picnic benches and sell them, and they ended up, they made them themselves. They put all this energy into creating these picnic benches, and they sold about 8 or 9, but after the cost of materials, they only made about $150. So a lot of effort, a lot of time for not much bang. And I said, wouldn't you rather have just reached in your pocket a little lower and not have to put all that time and effort into it? So sometimes we just acknowledge that it's a failure and move on. So I want to distinguish between management and leadership. Now, both are very important functions, but they ask different questions. So management asks, are we doing this right? So here's Dr. Evil tying up one of my members, who is being a little cantankerous. Now, are we tying up this person right? And maybe they were. But that's not the right question to ask. They didn't ask, should we tie up this person? Are we tying this person up right? So leadership asks, are we doing the right thing? Not are we doing it right, which is important, and we have to have systems and structures in place, but are we doing the right thing? And sometimes what we're trying to accomplish is new to us, and we don't have a roadmap. We're adapting to a changing world, and we want to find a vision that fits our work. And so we have to keep asking ourselves, are we doing the right thing? All right. This is annoying me. We're probably going to end up skipping some parts because of all the flipping. All right. Management. This is a quote by Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Because if you just change something for the sake of change, all you end up with is loss. And then you get tied up in loss and you can't move forward. But if you focus on creating a better model, something that's more efficient, more effective, more inclusive, that's what will lead us forward. Now, the world that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. Church is no longer the center of the community. And we've been lucky because the mainstream churches have known this for a long time. And they have had declining membership since the 1970s, and we've been growing up until just a few years ago. But now our membership polls are declining too. In fact, there's more people who call themselves an alien, who believe in aliens, than are Unitarian Universalists. Now, I would like to at least surpass the alien population. That's my junior worship associate there, dressed as an alien. So let me talk about some of the challenges we face in this new leadership environment. One is, of course, the economic decline, which I think has affected everyone, no matter where you live, whether it's California, New York, Florida. And we have that decreased safety net. And how many of you think the politics have gotten just a little polarized? In Ohio, it's crazy, the swing state, but I think it's probably just as bad here. And we're gridlock. The picture doesn't have anything to do with that. That's the ball game. I'm a baseball fan, and if you're wondering where I am and you haven't been able to get a hold of me, probably there. But we have that's the environment, and that's our context that we work in. Good. So what we're looking at throughout the region, the Central East Regional Group, which is St. Lawrence District, Ohio Meadville, Joseph Priestley, and Metro New York, is sharing resources. A part of my job is working with that group, and I work on stewardship. Renee does leadership development. And so we're just trying to be smart about having access to people with particular skills, but can't be employed by the district, each one. And so by sharing everything, we can hire more people and get a broader range of skills. But we still have access for all of you who are leaders to share your gifts. And so for you to look at what are your gifts. And in this process, we're going to have to step up our fair share, because the St. Lawrence District has been down at the bottom for a long time. However, you should feel really good because the fair share giving in this district raised 22% last year. And I think that's major. That's a major commitment to our association and to our faith as surviving into the next century. So one of the challenges that we face is we just don't know what the structure is that we're creating. Are we just going to share staff? Are we going to share governance? Are we going to change locations? We just don't know. And we're going to figure it out. And I put the uni sign on there because they're working their way through a new change too. We're going to figure it out, and it'll be better. Of course, better is relative. We all have a different perspective. So here, the guy in the land is saying, boat! And the guy in the boat saying, land! It all depends on where you stand. And so what do you need, what you're looking for, where you've been. Adaptive leadership teaches us that we need to ask powerful questions. And we need to have the courage in our churches and in our district to ask, are we doing the right thing? And where do we need to go? I'm really blessed that in my life I've had strong mentors who encouraged, pushed, manipulated maybe, me to a better way of being, because I kind of messed up my young adulthood, was doing some things that were really not helping me. And I worked at a summer theater one year, and this was during the 70s, and so a lot of the people there got up in the morning and smoked pot. At lunchtime, they had another pot, cigarette, and then later on they'd smoke some more, and then finally after the show they'd have a drink. And so it was just their daily routine, and there was one time that I was smoking with them, and my instructor pulled me aside and said, I want you to take a look at them. Is that what you want to be? Is that what do you want to get up in the morning, the first thing you do is take some drugs? Do you want to not have your head on straight so that you can really function? So that's not you. That's not the you I see. I want you to think about if that's where you want to go. And I really thank him for pointing that out to me, because it took some courage for him to talk to me and to not let me go down that road. And so I haven't. And my grandmother was very influential. She really taught me that, you just really have to do the right thing. I was in an abusive relationship when I was about 21 years old. And I just really wanted to get my life together, and this guy was, theater was a very unstable job, and so this man was stable, but he was also an alcoholic, and when he would drink, he would get very violent. And my grandmother took me aside and said, you need to leave. And we talked about all the different things that were happening, and I did. And it was really hard because he had a son that I was really attached to and I was worried about and that I had no power over if he left. But I left, and I was a statistic that, you know, we would go out to the cabin every weekend, and then he would drink all weekend and come home Sunday night, and then that's when the abuse would happen. And it's like, I needed to stop that pattern. And that's what we need to do in our assessment of the district too, is look at the patterns that are working for us and not working for us, and change them. Okay, Dave, you mentioned that there's nothing in the district that's maybe a barrier or problem or challenge moving forward. So, barriers. That's my car. And that's an enormous swamp in front of me. So, I'm visiting Camden, New York, which is an emerging congregation. And they said, we're meeting at a member's house, and the only way to get there is on a dirt road, so don't follow GPS because it's going to take you the long way and all this, and, just follow these directions. And the directions included going down this dirt road. He said, ultimately you're going to have to go down this dirt road. So I couldn't find the turn, but I ran out of turns and figured, here's the dirt road, this must be it. So I turned down the road, and at first the road was just a gravel road, and there was rocks and it was dry, and I'm thinking, cool, I'm a country girl, I've been on lots of dirt roads. And then, he did warn me that there'd be lots of trees around. And so then the road turns into kind of a rocky mud, and with lots of tree roots. And I'm thinking, okay, I can still deal with this. And then there start to be all these dips and turns, and I think, then the country girl emerges, right? All right, I can handle this, and I got my gay on, and let that inner butch come out, and I just tore down that road, and my car was pretty much flying and scraping on the bottom, and I wondered, okay, my second language is cursing, which I learned from my father, and I'm going, are you kidding me? Seriously, this can't be the right road. So, finally I come to this, and I have to decide. Now, GPS is telling me it's 0.9 miles ahead, right? Well, it didn't tell me there was a swamp in between. So, I say, okay, I give up, I surrender. I did contemplate driving through the mud, because who doesn't love a good mud puddle, right? I loved to play in the mud as a kid. And so, I stopped, and then I had to walk down a ways before my cell phone came into live action, and I called for help. And then I called the president of the group and said, I'm sorry, I'm only a mile away, but I'm just not going to make it. I have to wait for the tow truck and all of that. And so this is his response. And he said, no problem, I know exactly where you are, and I'll just get my chain and come and get you. And I thought, of course, he's going to get his chain and come and pull me out. And he did. And the interesting part of the story is that there was a new member there for the first time who came with him, and he drove my car back out of there because I decided I didn't want the fun. But he drove it up backwards. Can you imagine how coming to the church for the first time, you're invited to go get the district consultant out of the swamp with chains. So these are some tough libertarian people, I'm telling you, they could just about... That's right, that was exciting. And it's a little more risk than I normally take, but they had a solution that I wouldn't have thought of. I would have sat there all day waiting for a tow truck, but he just came with his chain, and we were about 10 minutes late for the service. I mean, it was just business as usual for them. We had a staff meeting this week, and one of the things that we talked about was, in this context of what are we trying to create, we decided we're trying to go for the Goldilocks solution. So not too hot, not too cold, just right. So we're looking at not too big, not too small, just right. The right amount of services. You know, in corporate language, they call that right sizing. I like Goldilocks better. Because we want to get it right. We want to make it better. Because no one likes cold porridge. So this is really where you guys come in. I mean, how can we infuse our world with passion? And you can't quite see it, but there's someone ready to leap into the water there. And that leap comes from that strong spiritual core that calls you when you see there's a beautiful sunset on the other side, and I'm going to go toward that. And I kind of view the regionalization that way. I think that we have so much to offer each other. We have so many unique gifts. And it was really the brainchild of Tom Trulak in this district that started all of this in motion. And this idea of sharing in clusters really brought a whole new sense of passion about how we can be together. And what I like to emphasize is that stewardship is a way of life. It's not just, oh, it's time to write my check to the church again, but that everything that we do is about caring for the earth, caring for our churches, caring for our people, and that's an embodied value infused in everything we do. And so it's not absent from any part of what we do. And if we ignore it, then we don't get the goods. We can't hold it. And then living those church values in the world. This is Angora, New York, and that's a retreat center that we're considering for Ulti next year. So just keep that beautiful image in your mind. The accommodations are rustic. That's to say they're bunk beds. And you have to bring your own sheets. But they're beautiful. And we want to find that nice, calm center where we can live our values in the world. I stole this from Joan. It's from our church. We've been called up for active duty. So you're all leaders. You're called up. Now you just have to figure out how you're going to respond. So I want to tell you a little story about my church. The church that I served in Ohio was about 70 members. We had, this is from our canvas show. For years and years and years, we parodied the idea of having a building. It was a congregation that was about 20 years old. Well, it was about 15 when I got there, 25 this year. But they had this vision, these cardboard cutouts of churches, and they had different shapes and sizes, but they had this vision of what they wanted their church to be. And they had a very clear path for for accommodating their ministry. First, they're going to have a full-time minister, then a church, and then add in the staff. And that was just in the life of the congregation to understand it that way. So every year they had a different song about, try and, we can, I think we can kind of stuff. And that's where we were, and that's where we ended up. That's the church that they built. So for the first 23 years, we were a church in a box. We met on campus in a music conservatory, and everybody loved it because the acoustics were great. We had a wonderful grand piano that someone else tuned every week, and we didn't have to pay for utilities and all that stuff. We just paid one flat rate for rent and could really anticipate our costs. And so, and it was just really comfortable seating, and the idea of being in a theater was really attractive to me. And so, but we experienced the peak of the economic meltdown, which is to say that our 70 members dropped down to 64 after we added a few in, and we were really wondering how we're going to move through our canvas, because one of the pledges was a really large pledge. It was one of our retired people who had to move south in order to live on their retirement income that had cut in half. And then a lot of our young adults had to move to find jobs, and we were really devastated from the loss of membership, but also didn't know how we were going to recover from the economic loss. So, and how do you even ask people for money when you know there's people who don't have jobs and that they're struggling to buy food and to do that daily life stuff? So we really had to think about that. And we joined a growth process. We were part of a 3-year growth process where we asked all those deep questions and are we doing the right thing? And it really helped focus our efforts on moving forward without the building. Like, we didn't need that. Our mission was beyond that. And so that was part of it, but we also had to change our attitudes about money, had to be more open about discussing that, had to become more educated about stewardship campaigns and capital campaigns. What happened when we were coming back from this growth meeting is that we drove by that church, and then one of our members said, "Oh, it's for sale." And we thought, oh, we should at least go look at it. And there's an article in the paper the next week that, this is the article that talks about that building being for sale for $80,000. And we all went, oh my God, we can totally afford that. We actually already had that money. So we went to look for it. And at that time, we were gearing up to do a capital campaign, but just for a down payment, not to actually buy a whole building. So, that we weren't going to do it right then because it was the peak of the meltdown. But we decided to purchase the building. We intended to raise $240,000 and raised $350,000 from a group of 70 people, and it was paid off. The loan for construction was paid off in 2 years. So I've left them without debt and with a beautiful building. And that brown paneling that you see there was in the foyer, and the building was blue. It was owned by the Masons, so everything was blue. So, all the windows were covered up. We went in there and we put in 70 windows. We tore down the paneling, and we rented it out for a year to the theater group so that we could raise money during that time. But we had our future home. And soon we were breaking ground. And you can see the joy on their faces. It was a huge accomplishment for them. And everybody was way more generous than I ever thought they could be. And I want to talk about our demo project again, because we used the building to communicate our values. And so the demo was an acronym for Don't Encourage More Obsolescence. Everything that we tore down, all that brown paneling, all these metal fixtures up on the ceiling tiles, the carpet, the old theater seats, everything in there we sold on eBay or gave away at Free Cycle. And the only thing that went into the dump was a couple of broken theater seats and an old sofa. Everything else somebody actually paid money for and ripped up that old carpeting and used that paneling for something else. And so we didn't add anything to the landfill. That was really a powerful statement. We put in lots of sweat equity. We're building the Zen garden there, and the same person who created the demo project started the Zen garden. And we put in a lot of our own time, but we did use mostly contractors and a little bit of Egyptian-style labor. But David Slauson is a Japanese garden designer, and he's internationally known, and he created that garden for us, so really added a lot of beauty. And then opening day wasn't perfect, but the extension was done, and we also put in an elevator. And we met in the lobby, and what we had done, because they were so attached to their old space, we took all our symbols from the old space, the pulpit, the chalice, the hymnals, and we did a processional with our things into the new building and did a blessing. And so it was a realization we lost the space, but we created a new space, and we have our important religious symbols with us. But on opening day, the paint wasn't quite done. There was scaffolding in the sanctuary, and there was a big table saw out in the copy area. And we had, in the basement, the elevator was spread on the floor in a million pieces, so we had to tape things off. We had to have escorts for the kids going to the bathroom to make sure they didn't start playing in the metal and things like that. But in my sermon that day, I don't know what I said, but I know I could have said blah, blah, blah. And it was a great sermon, Chris. Probably the best one I ever did. And then we had a big building dedication where we invited the community to come and join us. And it was, we invited the Masons, we invited the theater group and the mayor and all the people who had been in that building before. And it was really a great transition to being ours and thanking them for their love and care of the building before us. So it was a real proud moment. Now, I'd like to say that all change is not easy, that it all has that great ending, but it doesn't. We have to stay focused on what's really important and not just do things so that we relieve our anxiety. Sometimes we have to just hold things where they are and to find that great resting place. Not fill a spot because it's empty, but to think about, to use that time to say, what's the new direction and what should we be thinking about before just filling that gap? We need to learn to live with discomfort. I don't know if you can see this sign, but it says adult video, and Jesus is watching you. He is, you know. So it's cool, I like Jesus watching me. But it was some discomfort. We'll have to change our perspective. We'll have to look at things one way for a while, be on the boat for a while, and be on the island for another time. We call it, in adaptive language, being on the balcony. That's my cat, Tango, and he's just kind of hanging over the edge of the top of his cat condo, saying, I see everything you're doing in my kingdom. This is the road I was driving on. It doesn't look that bad there, but it was a little bumpy. But sometimes we have to take that road less traveled, because at the end of that road was an emerging congregation who's excited about Unitarian Universalism and wants to catch the fire of our faith and build our community. I didn't know I needed a four-wheel drive for this job. And now I think I need hip boots too, because I got out of that car and sunk. Did I tell you I was actually stuck? Because I tried to turn around, and of course I couldn't turn around because there was swamp on both sides of that narrow passage, so I got stuck. There's going to be a lot of chaos. Now, I had this idea when we bought the building that we were going to be able to keep our office there and sort of have normal functions during the week. I had no idea what construction was like. I don't know what I was thinking. And one of our very gentle board members said to me, you know, you might save a little money keeping the office there, but it'd be a pound foolish, penny wise. And I was like, you know, maybe you can stand construction desk, but what about the administrator? What about the people who are coming to your classes? And I'm like, oh, so it's not just about me? But it really opened my eyes. And then once the construction happened and there was stuff everywhere, I thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? I just didn't have any clue what kind of mess was generated. So I had to live in a lot of chaos with a few headaches. That's my hatchet head. My zombie sermon. So yeah, lots of headaches. But we kept getting back on that balcony and asking ourselves, is this the right thing? Is this what our church needs right now? How can that building be a tool for our ministry so that we can keep reaching out to people and not have to worry about leases expiring and finding places and spending all our energy just maintaining our structures instead of out there in the world doing our ministry. And so that was why it was so important to have that building done and completed without a huge mortgage that would be a burden to them and inhibit their work. So these are some of my thoughts about how this new model is going to look. And it's not anything set in stone, it's just my thoughts. But the main thing is that it's going to be purpose-driven by Unitarian Universalist values. That I know for sure. Whatever structure we build, whether it's keeping districts or building regions or some other configuration we have yet to determine, it's about promoting Unitarian Universalism and not inhibiting our work, but getting out there and doing our work. And to create more unified and sustainable systems and efficient systems. A lot of our time at staff meeting went around talking about email etiquette and some of the things that are big time wasters for people and how we might improve talking to each other. So you'll be hearing about that one because there's lots of information on the website that is out there for everyone to use. We'll probably have to do some updating of technology. It will be a networking and a collaborative model, whatever comes out of this. And we'll use focus and intentional use of resources rather than sort of random. It'll be very focused efforts. And there's going to be experimentation and trials. And we're going to try doing stuff, and different districts are trying things. And we're just going to see what works. And we're going to create the best structure that works for our location with our needs. So who's going to lead with me? Who's going to come for this journey and be part of moving forward? All right. Who among you can connect to your spiritual values? It's kind of hard to see that that's a labyrinth around a tree that is a great climbing tree at the Binghamton Church. But you need to connect to your personal spiritual values to engage in this work. And to examine your gifts and passions. That baseball picture again. But talk about passion. Doing it for the love of the game. Doing it for the love of our faith. Believing that what you do is important. And don't just fill voids. Embrace that creative tension and just say, we don't have to figure it out. We know we're here. So current reality compared to vision of the future. Somewhere in between is where we are. We know kind of where we're going. We know one thing for sure, and that is that we want Unitarian Universalism to be at this other end, and not to be a remnant faith where there's more people who believe in aliens than us. We're going to ignite social justice with passion now. Who among you went to GA? And how many of you think, can we ever do GA different? I mean, like, the old way again? We're going to have to ignite with our core values and stand on the side of love. This is from the Minneapolis General Assembly where we had the marriage equality gathering. We're going to create alliances. That's one of our politicians in Ohio, Dennis Kucinich. And those angel outfits were made by my partner. And what they did at Pride, because Ohio gets a lot of religious right people chanting things that people in the parade to, repent or, God hates fags, stuff like that. And so we created these angels that were massive to shield the people who were marching from the religious right people on the sidelines. And it was really a powerful image. They used this at Matthew Shepard's funeral too. We will be invited to move beyond the comfort of our congregations and to sit in protest and to do whatever there is. I mean, there's work with fracking, there's work with all kinds of issues in our lives, and we're going to have to get out of our churches and beyond our words and use our bodies and use our minds and use our voices in a different way, maybe with music. Music's always been part of social justice. This is Unitarian van from, I think it was, does it say on there? I think it's like 1917 or it must be before that. It says truth, liberty, and religion on the top, and then meeting here tonight at 7:30 p.m. And so back from the days when we used to roll up into town and say, meeting here, come with me. And we're kind of back there. We're saying, show up at the fracking sites, and we're just going to hold a vigil about the earth and how it's been damaged. We can't go back to that, but we're going to go back to the community. We're going to go back to those humble beginnings where we just connect with all those things that we care about and let that native spirituality just sing. Because we need to share those Unitarian Universalist values in the world to all the places that are hurting, and we're going to have to go to where they are. And that's my thought that I will leave with you today, is to go to where your heart leads you, follow that passion, ignite that spirit, and preach those Unitarian Universalist values. Blessed be.